Bienvenue à cette causerie organisée par l'École de la fonction publique du Canada et le Conseil du réseau des champions des langues officielles à l'occasion de la journée de la dualité linguistique. Il s'agit d'ailleurs de la première journée de dualité linguistique.
The first day of linguistic duality organized exclusively virtually. For those who do not know me, let me first introduce myself. My name is Stéphane Derry. I am Assistant Deputy Minister of the Real Property Services branch of Public Services and Supply Canada. I am also co-champion of official languages at Public Services and Supply Canada and chair of the Board of Network of Official Languages Champions. And today, it is my great privilege to lead this discussion.
Some housekeeping item out of the way so we can really enjoy the discussion that we're going to have today. First, to make your viewing experience better, we encourage you to disconnect from the VPN if it's possible and reconnect directly to the event. Second, let me quickly go over how the event will unfold. John Metcalf will first deliver the opening remark. We will then have a panel discussion with Marie-Josée Hamel, Nancy Chawan, et Hélène Laurando, followed by a question period. Pour poser vos questions.
To ask your questions, simply click on the participate icon on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Someone will see your message and will communicate it to me. Of course, this event is bilingual. You are therefore invited to ask your questions in French or English.
If you'd like to tweet during the event, please do not hesitate. Use the hashtag GDL2020LDD. Please note that the webcast will be recorded for training purposes. As you know, last year was a year of celebration. In addition to the 50th anniversary of the Official Languages Act, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Linguistic Duality Day. It was indeed in 2009 that the former clerk of the Privy Council, Wayne Water, designated the second Thursday of September as Linguistic Duality Day across the public service. This day gave us an opportunity to celebrate Canada's two official languages, which are a fundamental part of our public service and our value. Today, public servants from across the country are taking part in virtual activity organized in many federal institutions. I would like to thank all of them, including you here today joining us via webcast for taking the time to join in this celebration. Just want to know that there's over 2,000 people joining us today, over 2,200 people in reality joining us today on this webcast. This is a fantastic achievement. I really appreciate the interest that this discussion has created on the Journée de la Dualité Linguistique.
On the linguistic duality, this is a testament to the importance that you place on linguistic duality by being here today and through the presence of our speakers. I'm sure that you're all very eager to get started, so let's do just that. With our first speaker.
Introduce our first speaker for the opening address. John Metcalf works at the Transferable Skill Team at the Canada School of Public Service. His team curates, design, and deliver learning for federal public servants to help them develop portable skills and mindset that are relevant inside, outside, and across government. This includes learning related to business acumen, leadership, and enabling skills to help build a public service that is kinetic, connected, and collaborative. Depuis mai 2019,
Since May 2019, he is proud to assume the role of official languages champion here at the school to promote official languages within his department and to help his colleagues take official languages into account in all decision-making processes. Prior to joining the school in 2018, Mr. Metcalf worked at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, Infrastructure Canada and Transport Canada, after spending some 12 years in the private sector.
Welcoming John Metcalf. Over to you, John.
Merci, Stéphane.
Thank you, Stéphane, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me this afternoon. I am thrilled with this opportunity to participate in this event. This is a very important topic in the current context. And for a few months, as we know, a great number of Government of Canada employees have become virtual workers for the very first time, maybe in their careers. And of course, this has changed the way that we communicate with each other significantly. And it's an opportunity to consider potential implications for official languages. This is a topic I'm keenly interested in and that I've myself thought about very thoroughly, not just during the pandemic, but starting in January 2019, actually. As Stéphane stated, I am a champion of official languages, and I've also worked on the team of transferable competencies. And maybe I can share some of the experiences of my team in Telework. Our team is a fairly new team, and it was only created in January of last year, which means that the team was conceived and was created as a virtual team and a bilingual team. And why is that the case? Well, listen, given the fact that we are learning that public servants are everywhere throughout the country, we felt that to better serve them, we needed to better reflect the regional perspective and the diversity within the public service in developing all of our learning products.
We created a distributed and virtual and bilingual team, and about half of our 40 or so members are located outside of the NCR. And I should probably say that prior to this, I had never worked in a virtual team or even had a virtual colleague or a teammate. So all of this has been new to me and really new to us as a team. But we're kind of figuring out how to do it and learning a lot of lessons along the way. And I think maybe the biggest takeaway for us has been the importance of communication for a team to thrive in a virtual environment. And I'd say that we found communication really comes down to two important things. The first, I'll say, is having the right tools, and the second would be focusing on creating human connections. Et j'aimerais juste prendre 2 minutes.
And I'd like to take 2 minutes to discuss these two essential elements and to maybe share a few thoughts from our experience. So as far as the tools are concerned, well, there are many tools to support communications and virtual collaboration. We have all sorts of choices of software for video conferencing, for messaging, and so on. But in our experience, many of these tools do not necessarily support an equivalent experience in both official languages. For instance, someone can write their own communications in the language of their choice, but it's possible that they don't always have an option to choose an interface in English or in French for the software. So our team will choose the options that give us an opportunity for rich communications in both official languages.
Human one, because I think we all recognize that virtual communications aren't just about tools. They're about creating connections between members of a team. And, these take on a great deal of importance, I think, when we're physically distant from one another and when our interaction, happens on this little screen. So particularly during the pandemic, I think a lot of people have told us that the feeling of isolation and disconnection can be very real for them. And, what can we do about that? How can we create an environment where people feel connected and included and part of a team? And, not at all surprisingly, we found that language is hugely important in fostering strong and inclusive communications. And so thinking very intentionally about how to use both official languages in our meetings, in our presentations, our brainstorming sessions, etc., online, I think becomes extremely important to creating an inclusive environment where people feel connected to one another. And look, I'm not going to pretend that our team gets this right all the time. We certainly don't. We've had our share of hiccups and failures, but I think overall we are strongly committed to making virtual and bilingual communication and collaboration work, and so we keep on trying. Alors, selon...
So Given the experience of our small team, communications are absolutely essential to telework, and the tools that we choose and the environment that we use to value diversity and inclusion, including linguistic duality, are, in my opinion, extremely important for the current context. With the pandemic, telework has become standard for all of us. We've adjusted and we continue to improve by exchanging best practices. And that's the reason why we're so lucky today to have these exceptional speakers who are going to deal with these issues in a broader perspective. And I'm sure that this will lead us to interesting thoughts. So thank you very much. And I wish you a great Linguistic Duality Day. Back over to you, Stéphane.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. Really appreciated inspiring discussion. As you know, the unprecedented situation in recent months, as John was just explaining to us, and the role of his team has led to rapid transformation in our workplace. And I can guarantee that I'm responsible for office accommodation for the Government of Canada, and it did change. Our buildings are empty. Most of the buildings are empty and people are working from home. For some organizations, this shift might become a new normal. As we don't know how long we'll be in the situation, we are starting to see evolving maybe a new normal. Some organizations in the private sector for sure have already announced that they'll be virtual by default. They'll be teleworking by default. Bien que le télétravail comporte certains
Although telework represents some challenges, there are also some opportunities, particularly for official languages. The purpose of our talk today is therefore to initiate a reflection on this topic and to examine its impact on the future of the public service. To do so, we have the great privilege of hosting three distinguished speakers.
Introduce them. Première conférencière.
Our first speaker, Marie-Josée Hamel,
Official Languages and Bilingualism at the University of Ottawa and Faculty of Research Chair in Technology, Mediated Language Learning. She has been actively involved in computer-assisted language learning, teaching, research and development for over 25 years. Her background is in theoretical linguistics and in language engineering. Elle s'intéresse à l'ergonomie.
She's interested in ergonomics of call in automatic language processing and language corpora, second language didactics, advanced learners of French, and teacher training in call. She has published numerous articles and has been the editor of several special issues on these topics in call journals. Ms. Hamel has been a key partner in international research projects. Ms. Hamel, thank you for accepting our invitation. Our second speaker, Nancy Chawan.
As the Chief Human Resources Officer at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat in August 2018. Prior to this, she served as Assistant Secretary of the Government Operations Sector, TBS, from May 2015 to March 2017, at which time she was appointed Deputy Commissioner of the Canada Revenue Agency. Madame Chawan has held regional and national senior position in Public Work and Government Services Canada, where she was responsible for the rehabilitation of Canada's Parliament buildings, managed multi-million-dollar programs in acquisition and real property, and participated in Canada's space program. Her contribution include transforming program policies, implementation excellence, and fostering innovation. Madame Chawan a été diplômée de l'École des hautes
Ms. Chawan is a graduate of the École des hautes études commerciales in Montreal in business administration, with specializing in finance and management. She has also been active on the boards of directors for nonprofit and for-profit organizations as secretary, president, or chief internal auditor. Ms. Chawan is passionate in providing authentic leadership, empathic service, sustainable partnerships, and is an advocate for youth and executives. She's received an associate professional executives of the Public Service of Canada Award of Excellence in 2017 for a respectful and healthy workplace. Ms. Chawan, thank you as well for accepting our invitation. Our third speaker, Madame Hélène Rondeau.
Canadian Heritage in October 2018. In April 2016, Madame Rondeau was appointed Deputy Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relation and Northern Affairs Canada, formerly Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. Prior to her appointment as Deputy Minister, she served as Associate Deputy Minister for the department starting in December 2013. In early 1991, Madame Rondeau joined the public service with the Department of Justice. She held several senior executive positions at the Treasury Board Secretariat, the Privy Council Office, and the Public Service Commission of Canada. Madame Rondeau a obtenu un baccalauréat.
Madame Rondeau received a Bachelor's of Arts Communications degree from the University of Ottawa in 1982 and a law degree in 1985. She was called to the Quebec Bar in 1986. She practiced law in the private sector in the fields of administrative law, labor relations, and human rights from 1986 to 1991. Last February, she was named Champion of the Official Languages Community by the Clerk of the Privy Council. Madame Rondeau, I want to thank you for being with us today. I also thank you for playing this very important role of the Champion of Official Languages for the Government of Canada. Thank you very much. Now let's give a warm virtual welcome to all of our speakers. Madame Hamel, you are our first speaker, and now I give you the floor. Thank you, Mr. Derry. Thank you for this introduction. And since in my biography you mentioned CALL, I want to say that this means computer-assisted language learning. And I think that someone is going to share. Yes, it's coming up. Here are a few slides that I wanted to share with you. Because I'm reading my text, this is really a multimodal intervention. I'm going to keep an eye on the text, and someone else will look at changing the slides for me on the PowerPoint. So let's start by saying hello, bonjour.
The coast. Wow, it's amazing really how technology can bring so many people together. So at first I imagine it would be a small causerie with a few of you, but as it turns out, with 2,000 plus participants, I am talking actually to the widest audience ever in my academic career. So I would like to thank Annick Sauvé's team at the Conseil du Réseau des Champions des Langues Officielles and l'École de la Fonction Publique du Canada for this kind invitation, which is definitely pushing me outside my comfort zone. Comme j'ai déjà été présentée très gentiment par Monsieur Derry.
As I was already introduced by Mr. Derry, I would simply ask you to visit my website and also take a look at my publications. And if you feel like it also, you can also follow me on Twitter.
Institute, which I'm a part of, has for mission to promote excellence and innovation in the field of bilingualism and language acquisition. Do please have a look at our website, which will give you a good overview of our many teaching, training, and research activities. Maintenant, pour vraiment entamer cette discussion,
So to begin this discussion, let's start with an anchor point. First, I'd like to say to you that these anchor points fit in very well with what Mr. John Metcalf said earlier today and this afternoon in the previous presentation just before Mr. Derry. So in Canada, the learning of official languages in order to achieve a functional bilingualism is still a major and significant concern for our society, and to be bilingual is seen as being an asset, an important part of the Canadian identity. So therefore, be able to use a second language, well, that's something which you learn at school, but something you continue all your life. And it's based on communication. Of course, it's an activity using all the senses and promoted through social interaction. Therefore, it's a process for and with someone or with a group of people that involves, of course, talking to somebody else.
Education goes beyond traditional literacy, as it is complex, diverse, mixed, and in this context, L2 literacy becomes media-based and multimodal, and its development necessarily going hand in hand with that of digital literacy. Donc, dans le cadre de mes travaux de recherche et de mon enseignement en français,
So in my research and my teaching in French as a second language, and also in teaching of second languages, I took an interest really in the opportunities, the digital opportunities that people have, particularly Web 2.0, which is also called the social web, the participative web, in order to consolidate this multi-type literacy among learners of a second language. As far as I'm concerned, advanced learners in my case. So my approach really focuses on the development of the construction of an identity, on an individual, a digital individual, and the action on society as a citizen, a digital citizen in one's second language.
Interactional perspective that emphasizes participation in real online activities as L2 users in order to develop communication, linguistic, and intercultural skills. The media and multimodal nature of such real-life online tasks really reinforces the link with the arts and creativity, hence allowing for a deeper cognitive and effective engagement with the content that is produced in the L2, in the second language. On va souligner aussi.
We'll also point out, of course, it's been very important that the digital economy allows Canada, therefore, to develop French as a second language, to give privileged access to this language, to this culture, to its variations in the language and to its various cultures, and particularly in minority contexts in regions where French is really not heard very much. So the teaching of literacy skills, digital literacy skills, can therefore broaden the experience of learning for those people who use French as a second language, and also help to develop an identity in the second official language.
Today's discussion, I would like to make two recommendations based on my research and second language teaching experience. My first recommendation would be as such: join virtual communities in your L2. Create formal and informal opportunities to interact in your second language in various virtual communities, whether these are professional, personal, interest-based. Remember that discussion forums are a powerful tool for second language learning. Find them. Participate at various levels of interaction, whether as passive observers or as active contributors. Develop a feeling of belonging, a self in your L2, and do take those linguistic risks. Ma deuxième recommandation.
My second recommendation is put yourself in what we call standby mode. What you call techno-linguistic watch or techno-linguistic stop by. Really use every opportunity to use these abilities, use these new resources, get hold of them, new techno-linguistic resources that you really have not yet time possibly to deal with. So start with, for example, the Language Portal of Canada, which has excellent resources. I'd also draw your attention to our public broadcaster, CBC Radio-Canada, which also offers excellent resources in our second languages, in both of our official languages. Look at the use, for example, use Lingui, a multilingual translation system. Change the language of your interface, and also your applications can serve with Google. Share your discoveries, your experiences, and also exchange your best practices with your peers. Et final,
to expand your second language digital universe. Like shown in Henry's conceptual map produced at the beginning of my French as a second language class last term, which represents his own digital universe, make an inventory of the technologies that surround you, that you use in your personal and professional life, and seek within these first and beyond opportunities to interact in your second language. L'apprentissage d'une langue seconde.
The learning of a second language is made up of learning, of knowledge, but also of skills. But this is built first and foremost on the basis of being able to act and interact. The digital world, thanks to the size of it and the possibility it offers for connectivity and multimodal approach, can of course promote the development of this knowledge.
E-portfolio produced at the end of my FLS class last term. Work on becoming digital citizens yourself in your L2. That is, on participating, interacting, contributing within various communities online as L2 users, while making most of the many technolinguistics resources available around you, which has second language learning potential. Merci beaucoup. Je vous repasse la parole, Monsieur Derry, avec votre micro.
Merci beaucoup. Des petits problèmes techniques dans le cas de mon micro de sourdine. Merci pour votre présentation. J'aimerais maintenant passer la parole à Madame Chawan. À vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à Marie-Josée également et John. Je suis sincèrement heureuse de prendre part à cette traditionnelle causerie de la journée de la dualité linguistique et j'apprécie beaucoup le format inédit cette année. Alors voilà, je ne vous...
And I can't promise you, in fact, I won't be as concise as my predecessors. Nevertheless, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the situation, particularly in the public service.
Je vais commencer par vous dire que...
But first, I'd like to say to you that I'm very interested in this day. Language duality is really one of the main reasons why Canada, which is very unique in the world, and it's also one of the main reasons why my parents, in fact, chose this country, the country they wanted to live in. So this affects me personally and professionally. It's difficult to believe, but now this is the 50th anniversary of official languages. 50 years. Well, I guess that's not such a long time, really. Nevertheless, for half a century, Canada Now and the public service have been building together, have been building this duality, this bilingualism, as a result of which Canada really stands out on the international scene. And I think it's undeniable that we have made great progress in 51 years, in terms of capacity, but also in terms of complying with the legislation. There's something which was said by John which struck me. That is that, in fact, this is not something which just happens by chance. You need will to do this. You need an investment on the individual level and also on the community level, the collective level. Of course, we can be very proud of the situation, but we also have to recognize that, in fact, we still have a number of other major challenges to assume. For example, the equal stature of official languages. And I'll give you an example from the last survey with federal employees, staff, if you will. According to the most recent results, we know that the vast majority of public servants manage to create an environment which is conducive to the use of both official languages. However, there are certain results indicate that Francophones do feel less free than Anglophones to draft documents in the official language of their choice. or to take part in meetings in the same way. There's a difference there about 25%. We also know that Anglophones in Quebec are less satisfied than Francophones in Quebec with respect to bilingualism in the workplace, although the disparity is less than the other one I mentioned. This is not new. What is new, however, is the context in which bilingualism is evolving in the federal government. Apart from these circumstances imposed by the pandemic, but also, of course, including those circumstances. So I'd just like to take a few moments, if I may, to talk to you about some of these challenges and how we can work together on them. We have to look first at the base of bilingualism in the public service, the new context, and also new answers. New answers which are required in order to strengthen bilingualism. I don't want to disappoint you, but I don't have any ready-made answers. I know there are a lot of tools which are being developed, which are being updated all the time, but we also have to develop our own tools. We also have to be able to innovate ourselves.
Elements. You can tell yourself, well, we have a great official language act, correct? So we have a great foundation. You can also tell yourself, on top of that, the government has committed to its modernization. So again, case closed, right? Well, not quite. Because I believe that the foundational and the main foundation element of linguistic duality goes beyond rights and obligations embedded in legislation. It includes a values system. And this speaks directly to something that we've been talking a lot about in the public service lately, and that is inclusiveness and respect. En tant que responsable de la langue du travail.
As someone responsible for a working language in the public service, I ask myself a number of profound questions about this. How can we transcend the level of rights and obligations? How can we move rather to strengthen values in order to involve, to establish permanently this language duality?
The diverse communities that form the fabric of the Canadian identity, but also the fabric of the public service. How do we make sure that we are effective in our outreach to communities that resemble us, and we make sure that we actually resemble them? We cannot pretend to promote these values without consideration of the broader context. Et parlons d'une des premières données.
And when we talk about one of the first situations here in this new context, that's virtual reality, which has become now the standard, as Stéphane says, has become the norm, and I guess has continued for the next few months, if not the next few years. And official languages were possibly one of the first victims of this pandemic. So how can we strengthen bilingualism in the workplace? How can we make sure it's something which brings us together? Well, of course, we have to show imagination to do this, and we have to show will. As you know, the little pictograms which say you're invited to speak in the language of your choice, well, of course, they're not obsolete. But I think we have to be thinking about this again. How can we make sure, in fact, that we create a space which is safe and which is also inviting for people, encouraging to employees also to contribute to discussion in the language of their choice. And this is a challenge. I've often fallen into the trap of forgetting to show this openness myself, to forget to use my second language. In fact, in my case, it's my third language. So actively and also passively, you can see what I've got behind me on the screen. So it is an invitation, therefore, really to speak the other language in your conversation. But really, we have to do this with all Canadians. And the government has set up programs, which are remarkable programs, in order to deal with the pandemic in just a few weeks. And I do insist, in just a few weeks.
To be proud of it. We all own it. We all had a part in that. But we cannot turn our head away from the fact that the official languages commissioner has pointed out some shortcomings. The fact that the delivery of services in both languages was not necessarily simultaneous, nor was it of equal quality at all times. And this is serious. This means failing part of the Canadian population. Alors, comment est-ce qu'on peut nous outiller dans un contexte comme ça? Le rythme de travail est inédit, la complexité du travail a toujours été là, mais il faut en tenir compte. Et une question qu'on peut se poser, c'est alors que les institutions se préparaient à la crise, est-ce que les plans de continuité des opérations tenaient compte de la traduction, des services de traduction, des communications entre les programmes, les secteurs de com et le bureau de la traduction, par exemple, ou les autres services de traduction. Donc, c'est important qu'on puisse imbriquer cette pensée-là dans notre analyse d'offres de services et dans notre analyse de programmes, comme on l'a fait avec l'analyse basée sur le sexe. J'aimerais aussi vous parler en matière de contexte de l'avenir du travail and the future of work. And a few elements there. I think that the first thing that comes to mind in terms of the future of work is the adoption of new technologies. And obviously, AI is present in a lot of our programs. I know the Translation Bureau, even as you were there, Stéphane, did an amazing shift towards adopting AI. But beyond speed, I think that we cannot just rely on technology to make sure that that equal value and equal quality of our translation is afforded to all Canadians. So we have to be ready to experiment. We have to be vigilant, though, at all times to make sure that the standards that the Oil Act introduces and that Canadians rely on are actually respected. We need to make sure that we have, through that, a very open, deliberate, and explicit leadership stance. It is about the courage to say that official languages are important and they should have equal place in our workplace. Et ça m'amène à vous parler de la...
And this leads me, therefore, to talk to you about language security in terms of language insecurity. I already talked about this last year for those of us who are used to this. But language security, what is it? Well, when I speak in my second language, my self-official language, I might be afraid sometimes I won't be as efficient as I might be.
de phrases les plus efficaces.
I might not use the most efficient phrasing, and I may not speak according to the standards and the codes of my workplace. And therefore, that could generate a feeling of being less competent and less equal. And very often among our workplaces, it's felt by Francophones in a minority setting or those who are learning the language as a third language and have to use it in the workplace. So this is a very real phenomenon. It has been measured. There are many studies about it, and there's a lot of work being done within my team in order to give the public service the right tools to deal with that. Now, does the virtual environment that we operate in currently heighten this insecurity? Does that stop some from using official languages? I think that we've heard some examples from John. We've heard about broadening the virtual environment with Marie-Josée, and I think that raising the question is really answering it. And the challenge, especially when talking about chatting during a presentation, when you don't have the luxury of having simultaneous interpretation, I think that really heightens the problem. And also the pace of change means that those who are maybe a little bit more hesitant in their second language more hesitant to use that language, they're going to feel this insecurity even more so. So it's important to find the way to cure this situation. And the best way to do that is to ensure that the environment for us as leaders, but also as participants, is an inclusive environment, whether it's in person or virtual. And we really need to have the courage. The person who is going to speak up needs to show courage, but there also has to be respect from everyone who will be listening, and there need to be codes. Are we going to allow ourselves to help out someone who has trouble finding a word in a second language, or is that really not well perceived within the group? That's something we need to talk about, and it's good to talk about it.
That they should tap themselves on the back, and I said slap themselves on the back. So that gave rise to quite a bit of laughter. But you know what? It's just fine. It's just fine. Alors, on a très hâte au bureau
So we're really looking forward to including you in our work in terms of linguistic security.
Actually, to be in touch with the Center of Expertise on Official Languages within OCRO. There's a lot to be done, and we need everybody's ideas, what works, what doesn't work. La langue de travail, les
working languages, communications with the public, linguistic aspects of the work of tomorrow, these are the elements that bring us together. And I want to leave you with one thought from Jean-Yves Ducrot, a minister who participated today in awards for official languages, and then there was a roundtable right after that. And he said, we all have an individual responsibility to develop ourselves and to contribute, but we also have a responsibility to support each other. And I will close with those words. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Chawan, for this very encouraging intervention, and it will feed into our thinking. I'm certain that our participants will have several questions about what you had to say. And now I'll give the floor to our third speaker, Madame Laurando. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Mr. Derry. Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. I also want to thank my co-panelists, because I have to say that you have raised some very interesting ideas, and I'm sure that I feel the need to contribute to this discussion. First of all, I need to let you know that I'm speaking to you from my dining room in Gatineau today. But what's more important is that I'm on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, and I want to thank them for continuing to cohabitate with all of us. And since there are 2,000 participants from coast to coast to coast, I want to invite you to think about the traditional territory that you may be on when listening to this conversation.
I would like to recognize that we all work from different places and we all come from different places. De mon côté, j'aimerais partager.
For myself, I also want to share a personal point of view about the importance of official languages. I had the great privilege of raising two great children who are now 28 and 30. Their father is British, and my family is Francophone and spoke very, very little English. So our core became the sort of a bridge between the two cultures, the Anglophone and the Francophone culture. When I was very young, my father said at one point, you mustn't be afraid to learn other languages. The one at the deep in your heart is always the most important, but you have to make room for others.
In English, the difficult way in Montreal. À titre de sous-ministre du patrimoine canadien.
As Deputy Minister for Heritage and Champion of Official Languages for the community within the government.
To be with you today, to mark this 11th edition of the Linguistic Duality Day. I'm also very proud that we're doing that virtually and that we're making the testimony to the capacity that we have to actually reach out to each other through the technology. This day is an occasion to promote our official languages, English and French, which are among the fundamental values of Canadian society and the Canadian public service. Nancy a très éloquemment fait état du fait que...
And that was stated quite clearly. The respect of linguistic duality also includes the respect for our Canadian identity.
English and French demonstrate the openness, empathy, and respect that characterize Canadians as people. It is a source of richness and pride among the elements that define the Canadian identity. And I think that we can build on that to welcome other culture within our society, including recognizing the cultures that were there well before us, which is the Indigenous people in Canada. Nos langues officielles sont...
Our official languages are a standard of excellence within the Canadian government apparatus, and it is something that we share. And even if sometimes we have some difficulty in fulfilling this responsibility to express ourselves in both languages, it still is something that is important, and it is something that brings us together, but also that distinguishes us internationally. Nancy said quite clearly that certain people choose Canada specifically for this reason, and this is something we need to be proud of. As the Federal Public Service, we have no other choice but to show just how crucial it is to communicate frequently with the population and use French and English in order to give critical information to the population as a whole. In the last few months, we have seen with the COVID crisis that the provincial and territorial levels were closely called upon. But it was important to have clear communications for the greater public in both official languages, preferably simultaneously and with the same quality. Whether it was for the scrums, for the notices to the public that had to be expressed, or notices, emergency notices, it's essential to have these communications, and it's part of our duty to be aware of this reality and to build our communications and the structure of what we're trying to communicate in a way that will be something that will be heard both in French and English. Information during a crisis is vital, but the ability to understand messages that are public notices are essential in order to guarantee the safety of Canadians. And this is the reason why these communications from every level of government in both official languages are so essential. That being said, using technology more and more has to bring us to realize that in certain cases this increased use because of a lack of accessibility in certain regions of Canada can actually worsen the difficulties for some communities that are in a minority situation. And we have to be very aware of that, not just to solve these issues with internet access, but also think of other ways of communicating for those places where that access is not guaranteed as it is in the cities. So it's essential as part of our thinking that we also are very aware of this reality.
We have entered a new reality, as it was mentioned. The area of telework has been omnipresent. We now have the opportunity to rethink our ways of doing things to achieve the right balance, which will allow us to not only seek a true culture of bilingualism within the public service, but also to ensure better service to Canadians and a better reflection of linguistic diversity across the country.
There have never been so many developments and new initiatives and programs as there are currently in such a short time frame, and this is done within a distance context to a great degree. We should be proud, and we should celebrate all of the work that has been done within the public service. And I really want to congratulate the 2,000 participants here today who are here to listen.
Our partner in doing this massive realization that we have done for our fellow citizens. But have we compromised the official languages in doing so. Nancy obliquely referred to the fact that we had instances where we may not have been necessarily up to par. Et c'est essentiel de
And it's essential that we continue to ask ourselves some questions, to continue to think this through, and to ask our partners on the ground about how they feel about where these lapses may have been. I've already talked about the issue of access to technology, but we also have to be keenly aware of the fact that the technology is not necessarily accessible to all. And I would like to invite you all to be very aware of this reality, because that impacts minority communities, but it also linguistic minorities, but it also impacts some of our employees who don't necessarily all have the same degree of access to technology. Last June, we organized meetings with representatives for official languages in federal institutions and spokespeople of Francophone and Anglophone minority communities in order to ensure that this conversation is held about efficiency in communications during the pandemic. And these participants were very open with us, and they presented the results of our survey about the pandemic in community services and linguistic minorities. And one Francophone community spoke about difficult access to high-speed internet in rural areas, but they also mentioned that they themselves had some trouble adapting to this new virtual reality.
I think that we need to be conscious to their limits so that we can actually fill those gaps by alternative means.
We have several projects underway currently in order to ensure the increase in access to high speed, and that should be done soon.
Show that many of the challenges are common to the English community and minority situation and the Francophone communities, which raises an interesting possibility of synergy among themselves, because the reality is that they tend to all be often very isolated, and they are facing often the same challenge of access as Madame Amel has mentioned earlier. The importance of being able, even passively, to have access to your second language can be important, but it's even more important if you're in a minority community situation. C'est sûr que
clearly there has been progress. Even during the pandemic, I was able to talk to my own colleagues about the necessity of being very aware of the impacts of working only in one language.
Was very, very open and very fast. I'm thinking of Health Canada when we pointed out to them that some of the PPE equipment or some of the disinfectant were only provided because they came from foreign sources, only had, des modes d'emploi en anglais uniquement. La réponse
that they were only explained in English because of where they came from, and they reacted quite quickly to ensure that the Francophone communities would have the same information as the Anglophones. But that being said, this also offers us many opportunities for innovating, and I want to encourage all 2,000 of you to ensure that you are not fearful of putting forward innovative solutions as to how to address these gaps, whether it's temporarily until the permanent solution is found, for instance, broadband for everyone, or through alternative means in order to ensure communications in both official languages. We can think of how to fully utilize opportunities such as Canada Day and sports events so that we can strengthen our feeling of belonging, but also our fundamental pride in being able to say that we are part of a country that is bilingual and that is proud to be bilingual, even though each and every one of us may not necessarily individually have the same ability in both official languages.
When it's time to take positive actions to actually favor the promotion of the linguistic duality. And I have to say, I want to commend many of my Anglophone colleagues, because I realized in the past 30 years that there are way much more of my colleagues that actually take the leap to talk to us Francophone in their second languages. And many of them, if not most of them, in the deputy minister community are really fully, perfectly bilingual. We just don't hear them often enough. And when we tell them how charming they are in speaking the other languages, this is when they actually ease up and speak a little bit more. And I would invite you to do the same thing with many of your Anglophone colleagues, because the capacity is deeper than we profess it within the public service. I think we're sometimes a little shy to use it. And I am quite impressed, quite frankly, about the quality of the French that I hear from most of my colleagues, from the clerk all the way down to the most recent appointees among associate deputy minister. On était capable
that we were able to promote both official languages and also to make room for all other cultures within the Canadian community.
We also have been quite lucky to have our astronauts, Chris Hadfield and David St. Jean, speaking simultaneously to children in English and French to actually share their experience and to actually give them courage about what it meant to be confined, given that children were primarily confined at home. And I think that these type of events are quite powerful because they demonstrate through leadership many, many layers of Canadian identity, the capacity to share in both languages, the capacity to hold events in a way that actually speaks of the linguistic duality while demonstrating that we can be leader in something like space exploration. Very, very inspiring. I want to also commend Health Canada that continues to work with the beneficiary of the official languages and health program to support initiatives in minority communities in the context of COVID-19. My colleague Stephen Lucas have been quite responsive when we actually pointed out to him some of the gaps that we were seeing. And I want to commend both him and his department for their reaction. Finally, I think, because I really want to entertain questions and comments, I think that I would like to echo what Madame Amel has said. There are many, many opportunities that technology offer us to actually quietly, if we are shy, learning our second language until we feel just a little bit more secure in being able to use it more publicly. Experimenting around areas of interest with people who are just interested in a topic rather than your proficiency in one language or the other can be a very interesting way to actually test the waters on our capacity to express ourselves in our second language. I would also tell you, spending time with kids who in a very, very easy way, and using technology to reach out to kids in your environment that speak the other languages. The beauty of children is that they use simple language. So you can ask them very basic questions and they will give you very basic answer, and they probably will be within the realm of what you are sure to be able to understand. So I encourage you to do these things because at the end of the day, we are there to serve Canadian, and those Canadians speak the two languages, and we have a duty to actually make space to be able to communicate with them in the language of their choice, and we're capable of doing that. So I will leave it at that. I had way much more things to do in my remarks, but I think it's important that we give time for Q's and A's. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to our speaker for your inspiring discussion. I think it sets the table for a really good discussion period. We have about 30 minutes, 28 to be exact, where we can entertain questions from our 2,000 viewers. Now we're gonna open the Q&A period. I would like to remind you that you can submit your question at any time by pressing the button participate icon located at the top right hand corner of your screen. Someone is monitoring the inbox and will bring your question forward. Posez des questions dans la langue de votre choix.
Ask the questions in language of choice. We talked about bilingualism, we talked about innovation, we talked about challenges, but also about opportunities. Opportunities to promote both official languages during the pandemic in a virtual format. So please ask any questions you want in the language of a choice. And I have a first question here from the public. Here's a question. The immigrant community, it comes back to Ms. Chawan said, the immigrant community might be attracted by Canadian bilingualism. You mentioned this yourself, in fact, in your statement, Ms. Chawan. This is very enviable. What can we do to promote bilingualism as being an asset and not being a burden? I'm adding something there when I say that, but often you hear that it's a burden for public servants to have to speak French or English. But how can we promote bilingualism as an asset? And the person then says, it's really a luxury to be able to speak both languages in this country. Let's start with Ms. Chawan. If anybody else wants to join in with the answers, please do. Just raise your hand and then you'll have the floor. Thank you, Stéphane. That's a very good question. It is an asset, and it's an asset in terms of immigration. Can you hear me? Good. And as you know, my answer might appear cynical, but it's not really cynical. When we welcome international participants to certain conferences, sometimes they're surprised. They're surprised to see how much emphasis we place on bilingualism. People from the Netherlands, really, they speak 3 or 4 languages. I think that's normal. But here we make a big fuss about speaking another language. But I think this is a question of generation, culture also, and geopolitical issues. And really, it's a generational issue, in fact, which will change. Now, we appreciate the wealth of languages. Patrick Bovies, president of the Public Service Commission, said to me, really, it's a question of merit for a public servant, just like his degree. It's to his credit. It's useful for him. And it's this cultural change which really we need to implement. But not just in the public service, but in the general public in Canada. And even though I fully agree with the fact, in fact, we're reflecting in broader terms about language skills, including Aboriginal languages, service, for example, at Revenue Canada. Now we have our communications going out in a number of languages. But in the legislation, we have 2 official languages. And I think there is a danger at the moment that we might lose a minority language in certain circumstances. So it's up to us really to continue to push that as being an asset and as being something which contributes to our wealth. If I may, Stéphane. So very briefly, I think there's a choice here. You can accept what are fundamental values of Canada. Yes, we have legislation, but we also have a Charter of Rights. which talks about the bicultural and bilingual nature of our country. And there are rights, also other rights, which exist under Section 35 of the same Charter. And of course, there's a difference between what is written in our values and what is simply a choice. If, for example, in our values, we say that we want to move towards a country which would be functionally bilingual. And respect of languages, whether you speak them or don't speak them, is absolutely fundamental. But the promotion of those languages, that's everyone's duty. And these are two different things. You can promote the using of both languages, even if you're not able really to use both languages for the moment at least. Because maybe you speak another language, an Aboriginal language. But we have a duty, nevertheless, to promote Canadian values, which are part of our collective identity. So it's not a burden. These are values we have. These are not burdens. I'd just like to say something quickly as a linguist, that learning a second or third or fourth language, of those people who speak those languages, when we come to the second or third language, after you've learned the second one, when you come to third and fourth, it's easier because you understand the system. You get to understand how a system works, and you apply rules which apply generally to a number of languages. Of course, there are differences, there are specific features, but I think we have to equip ourselves as an immigrant when you come here and you have services offered by the government. But you also have this possibility of being in a country where a lot of things are bilingual. As I said earlier, change the interface of your apps. Maybe you can use the interface in French instead of using it in English. So you've got a flexibility then. This creates flexibility. We've got all the artifacts around us, and these stimulate us to learn more about the language that we want to learn, which in some cases might be the third or fourth language. Thank you very much to our three panelists for their answers. Now the next question. This is of particular interest to me because as a manager, and as someone who's not perfectly bilingual,
language of the majority, especially virtually, the conversation start, and even I'm asking myself, was I speaking in French or in English? Donc, c'est souvent difficile de faire la promotion de...
So sometimes it's difficult to promote bilingualism and linguistic duality when you're having virtual meetings. Because you might be involved in a very interesting conversation.
The manager on how to convey trust in the workplace to provide that space to employee to express themselves in the language of their choice. Est-ce qu'il y a de nos panélistes that would like to propose an answer or propose some tip?
Well, I will share some of my secrets, if you don't mind.
I would appreciate it.
I tend to speak very fast in French, and when I need to think, I often switch in English because it gives me time to think. And it doesn't show as much to my audience. It's tongue-in-cheek, but the reality is that sometimes create a pause in the conversation by switching to the other language, often allow the interlocutor. And, you know, when you're at the top of an organization, you are, whether you like it or not, often on the spot. So sometimes to gather your thought, passer d'une langue à l'autre, ça te permet d'articuler un peu mieux ce que tu...
So if you go from one language to the other one, this helps you really to better organize your thoughts. However,
sentences in the other language is inviting whoever to actually switch to whatever other language may be in use. Moi, ça m'amuse beaucoup. J'ai le privilège d'être la
I'm the privilege to be in Heritage Canada. I'm very proud of that. And with the Public Service Commission, I would say that Heritage Canada is the agency in the Federal Public Service which is the most intrinsically bilingual. and I really enjoy interacting with the Assistant Deputy Minister, who's an Anglophone. And I speak English with him. That gives me time to think. But this becomes second nature when you start to use that technique. There's a slogan from the ASQ in Quebec. You know, enjoyment increases with use. So if you use your language more and more, you will enjoy it more and more, because it increases number of opportunities to speak.
To create a joke instantaneously, the slap in the back that Nancy mentioned is a good example of that. Alors, c'est l'utilisation, ne pas avoir peur de l'utiliser, et surtout comme leader, de démontrer qu'on l'utilise, même si personne ne comprend, parce que ça m'est arrivé dans certaines situations où tu passes à l'autre langue, peu importe quelle est l'autre langue, puis personne ne comprend. Puis là, tu dis, ben c'est correct, je vais retourner à l'autre langue, mais j'ai quand même dit ce que j'avais à dire dans la première langue. C'est l'utilisation qui va encourager les gens. That's how you create momentum.
Peut-être aussi qu'il faut saisir des opportunités.
Maybe you also have to seize opportunities and say, well, yesterday, look, I attended this wonderful day on linguistic duality. And I think it'd be good between us, we need to be a little bit more patient, to feel a certain empathy. And we need to flip, to switch, to say, well, we'll do all this together, and verbalize this, to say, well, look, when we meet together, don't hesitate.
About the posture we want to adopt, the new self. I was talking about constructing yourself, you know, as a L2 user. It means taking room and place and saying out loud that this is what you want to do and achieve with others. And so I'm thinking about tolerance, empathy, and you said, Madame Laurando, humor, and I think it's very important. Patience, and be slow. Yes, go slow. It's okay. It's okay to speak slow and for the others to look and to watch and to know the answer, to know what you're about to say, but just to let things happen. At the beginning of this pandemic, everybody was on a panic and stress mode. All my teachers, my language teachers at Olby, everybody wanted training. You know, everybody wanted to know and develop skills really rapidly with all this technology. And I think that we have to take things patiently and one by one, you know, fight one battle. So when I said earlier on to explore, you know, to be in technological watch mode and to look at linguistic resources, go one by one. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to participate to all those networks and communities, and just choose a battle, choose one tool, one resource, and explore it slowly and progress with, you know, with being able to interact more passively then and a little bit more, you know, actively as you go on, and be proud. Yes, soyez fiers de ça avec les autres.
Be proud of that and be proud with the other people too. Stéphane, I'd like to talk a little bit about tolerance and patience, which Hélène and Marie-Josée talked about. My answer is this.
If as a manager and as a chair of a call, a video conference or a meeting, you show the least sign of impatience or you tolerate signs of impatience, when somebody takes longer to express themselves, you just killed that spirit of a safe space. And that happens very often. It happens, you all know when you're translating a text, which side is longer? The French, right? And it's not just because of the words, it's about the culture. Francophones will put a lot of context and nuances around their sentences and caveats, right? So we need to accept the cultural difference that's behind the linguistic duality. And tolerating signs of impatience just kills that spirit of encouraging somebody else to speak in their language. So it's really about making sure that even if you're chatting, you know, you're using the chat function and you're asking a question to the group, write it in both languages. It's a good exercise to be concise. But you know what? These little things are demonstrating that you're encouraging that. The last thing I'll say, which is a huge pet peeve of mine because I've lived it many times through the years, you say something in French because you want to encourage Francophones when they are the minority, or vice versa, English when I was in Montreal. And people look at you, they continue, and then somebody who actually is fluent will pick it up, pitch it again in the language of the majority in the group. And suddenly you see that reaction, oh, that's a bright idea. And you're like, did I say it in Arabic? So you know what? I want to speak about those things because I can tell you I'm not alone feeling like this. And it's important if you're the manager chairing a meeting to, when you see this happen, to say gently, to say, that's a good idea. And I believe this is what Stéphane was trying to convey earlier, so that Stéphane doesn't feel that because he took the courage to speak in the language of the minority to encourage that duality, that his thought went lost on people completely.
Pour revenir à la technologie, la multimodalité.
To come back to technology, multimodality helps with this. At the time when you're talking, in video, for example, but there's also a chat line alongside, which enables me as a participant to do a little translation. I'm not sure to send that to the chat. So there are moments, and there's technology that makes it possible to take our time. And also to be able to write and say at various speeds, and perhaps I calm this tension down, appease the tension. Thank you very much.
Supervisor, a manager for who I work, which I won't name right here, but I'm a Francophone. My first language is French, so I tend to speak English. But when my manager speaks French, 3-4 sentences, as Madame Laurando mentioned, or English, vice versa, when he speaks French in one of our meetings, it tweaks my, hey, I can speak French. And then it gets me to speak French. It welcomes the people that would like to express themselves in French or English, depending on which meeting you're at and what's the majority, the language of the majority. It helps, it opens the door to have other people express themselves in the language of their choice. So sometime, and I'm trying to do that also when I hold meetings, and sometime opening that door à l'autre langage.
Opening the door to the other language helps people to express themselves, and they feel therefore welcome to do so. I'm going to ask a question. At the moment, we're talking about a virtual public service. We've done some wonderful things during the pandemic. We've seen the value of the public service. We've seen how the government and how public servants, even at distance, were able to establish programs. Look at Revenue Canada. Look at ISDC. Look at Health Canada. Ms. Laurando, you did mention that yourself. So we work in an environment which is divided by regions. Today you can work anywhere, almost anywhere, from anywhere. We talk about bilingual regions. And when I consult people on the future of buildings and on the future premises, I hear a number of deputy ministers say, assistant deputy ministers say, well, we want to use Aboriginal people. Why can't we use Aboriginal people at home in their communities rather than ask them to move to Ottawa? So it's not a virtual manpower, but we're hiring the talent where the talent is. What do you think of that? Do you think that helps, therefore, for bilingual regions or unilingual regions? Do you think in the future we'll be obliged to adapt our reaction and make sure that we have a really nationally bilingual public service?
I'll speak first. Sure. I'll speak. I said I wouldn't speak to that. Well, maybe I'm going to provoke in my answer. Let's not forget that at the outset, what defines bilingual regions and unilingual regions, you have to have a distinction between the language of service and the language of work. And if we talk about the language of work, then maybe the universality of bilingualism is going to be broaden out, because if we hire talent where it is and use it virtually. That's a question I'm raising. I don't have the answer. I think it's an open question, and we're going to evolve based on requirements. As far as the language of services, we have to be more subtle, though. Let's not forget that the language of service offer is defined by those that we serve, and we can't impose anything through the language of service. We have to actively be able to offer services in both languages, but we have to still be able to offer the services in the language of the region where we operate. So to me, there's a dichotomy there. And as long as the country as a whole does not become bilingual for each and every citizen, even at that point, we can value bilingualism without being in a situation where everyone has to be bilingual, and the public service will have to adjust, and not the reverse being the case. But it is possible, indeed, if we take full advantage of distance work, we can hire people who will be maybe in a bilingual situation where the necessity of service doesn't require it as such. And I think that that's going to be part of the future.
To be incremental. I don't think we can just sit down in offices and otherwise make decree about one way or the other. I think that we need to be mindful that if the reason behind what we're doing is to actually give access to Indigenous people or other communities that are located in some specific areas, we also need to be mindful of their reality when we hire them. Alors, I believe that the nimbleness will come from us and not the other way around. And when I say us, I mean those of us who will be present to manage that transition in the near future. But I would encourage us not to actually try to maintain a status quo for the sake of not having to question ourselves around those issues. Quite the contrary. If we want to innovate, we're going to have to embrace some of those challenges in bracket.
Mm-hmm. Je pense...
I think that Hélène's answer is very nuanced and quite deep. I would like to add 2 comments.
Find talent, and quickly. Talent, when I say find talent, I mean internally to the workforce, but find it wherever it is right now across the country, but also recruit externally, because some talent, some skills would take too long to develop internally. So as we try to be more nimble in talent acquisition and more inclusive and diverse in our talent acquisition, we will tap into this broader population. And it will beg the question, what happens if we have to make a choice between very pointed skills and bilingualism? And how do we join that merit question? And we must. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I don't know, and we cannot take a hands-up function with 2,000 people, but I wonder how many knew that the government has adopted a new regulation in regards to official languages that will become effective in a couple of years. And we have changed the way we calculate the threshold to trigger the need for a bilingual office. And that means that we will see an increase in bilingual offices or offices designated bilingual by a few hundred, 700 or 800. And for one example of criteria, we're not just looking at proportionality of demographics, we're also looking at the richness of the communities of the second language. For example, do we have schools for the minority language community in an area, which means we should have, as a federal government, offices that offer bilingual services. I bet you my ADM is super proud of me right now, or he's saying, oh my God, you just killed it, that's not it at all. But I'm fairly confident with what I'm saying. And so this trend has already been adopted. It's just a matter of letting departments staff up accordingly in those newly designated bilingual offices. And the information I have and the data we have in terms of recruitment is that there's a huge perception gap about our inability to find bilingual people across the country. So more to come. Marie-Josée.
I want to talk from an education standpoint and say talent is coming. I'm hopeful that by teaching digital as well as second language literacies together, we are going to better train our children and our young people, and to do it across discipline, to learn a language and to learn digital skills across discipline at all levels of literacy will bring us good people, good bilingual, open culturally, people who will be able to contribute to this workforce. Donc c'est important de...
It's important to give support to these organizations and these governments and these departments of education that are thinking these issues through, to have a better citizenship taught digitally and are working together. And I want to name this organization, Appui aux Médias, which is thinking about developing literacy and digital citizenship that in a modern way. They've done extraordinary work in pulling together in all of the provinces these notions of literacy and citizenship in a digital world. And this is going to greatly contribute to teaching and learning a second language. And in this immersive setting that we believe in at the University of Ottawa, where we learn French as users of the language throughout all of the disciplines. Talent is coming.
Thank you very much. And believe it or not, that brings us to the close of our conference today. On behalf of the member of the Council of the Network of Official Languages Champion and the Canada School of Public Service, I would like to thank our speakers for participating in this discussion. It was very interesting to look at how official languages are affected by this shift toward telework. As you know, the Council takes great pride on its collaboration spirit. Of course, Linguistic Duality Day is no exception. J'aimerais donc prendre un instant pour remercier très sincèrement.
I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank all of the people who helped to organize the Linguistic Duality Day activities. First of all, we want to thank the Language Portal of Canada team and the Translation Bureau at the Public Services and Supply Canada, who prepared an inventory of resources for this occasion and even designed magnificent visual elements that were shared with the federal institutions. So thank you to all my colleagues. Thank you also to the officer of the Commissioner of Official Languages, which has prepared a quiz to mark the 50th anniversary of the Office of the Commissioner. And I would also like to congratulate them for their great work over the past 50 years.
Done so, I challenge every one of you to take the Commissioner's quiz. You will find the link on the Linguistic Duality Day page on our website at canada.ca. OSE there. I would also like to thank our partner at the Treasury Board Secretariat and at the Canadian Heritage, with whom we have worked closely on a number of important files. Our special thanks to our colleague at Canada School of Public Service for their continued support with the organization of this event. So truly a pleasure to work with you. And finally, if you have not already done so, take a few moments to check out the video launched by the Council this morning about tips and tricks on how to work promote the official languages while teleworking. Employees from different organizations from across the country have filmed themselves, so don't expect a movie from Toronto or somewhere else. Everybody film themselves and give tips and tools to promote the use of both official languages. Again, you can find that on our website. And I would like to thank PSPC Creative Services for their help in producing this video. Ceci met donc fin à notre séance.
So that concludes our session. Thank you for your participation. And the school is continuing its efforts to improve virtual events. Therefore, your feedback is essential and it will help us to have even better events. So please do take a few moments to fill out the short survey that will be sent out shortly. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of the participants. And thank you so much. We'll see you again next year and enjoy this Linguistic Duality Day. Thank you. Fill out the quiz in your second language. Yes, of course, do that. This is a huge opportunity.
Ça revient.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thanks, everyone.